Cast. Hello and welcome to Live Work Life 60-minute mentor sessions. I hope everyone's fit and well, and as people start to log in, I hope people can hear me. So if you can hear us, if you can please do the usual, put a comment in the chat room or the questions and answers, it'd be very much appreciated. This week, as always, we've got an extremely full agenda as well from the questions that you've been sending in to us. So again, thank you very much for all the questions. It's been very much appreciated. On a Monday night, Paul and I usually get together and spend some time sort of going over the questions and going over the format of the webinar and looking at things and how we should answer your questions. So it's always an enlightening stage for us to sort of look at what questions you're asking, but we also find it extremely motivating and invigorating looking at what we've got to cover and what things that we can add and help you with. So as we push on and people start to log in, I want to sort of talk and start this off really about looking at management and management as a whole. And I think I had it expressed to me in the best way possible the other day by a client that felt that their management wasn't all about winning and all about creating a brilliant business. They found that management was all about enriching the people's lives who work with them, and that included the consultants, the clients, and their candidates. And I found that very interesting. And when we started to then dig further into the business, we found that they had very low attrition. People had been with their business for an awful long time. New people, when they came into the business, got into the rhythm of the business very, very quickly. And he found that if he looked after his people, then the money would come. So he was never interested in the win. He said, after a while, I wasn't interested in the win. It was all about enriching people's lives. So it's important that we start and we talk about management of people, training and development of people, as we are in this webinar, that we start to think about what values we can actually give to people and how we work with people. And so we start to think about how we deliver our mission statement and our value statements to our people, rather than just adding a bum on a seat to our clients. So when we start to talk about that, we all talk about the training and development of people and what's going on. So moving into that, Paul, it's been a long week from our perspective on what we've been doing, and we've been talking to lots of clients about training and development. When we start to think about that, what do you think is the first thing we need to sort of look at from a training point of view before we start moving into the actual physical training of the people themselves?
Firstly, morning and welcome everybody. I don't know what the weather's like in your neck of the woods, but it's pretty decent here. If you can hear some noise in the background off my mic, I think the gardener's outside on the lawnmower and picked the perfect time to be mowing, but apologies for any exterior noise you may hear. Let's talk about this investment in people, as you say, Howard. And I would say right now, given this extraordinary situation that we're all in, in developing your people, training your people as we bring them back into the workplace is critical. It's so important because, let's be really clear, and I've been saying this as you have, Howard, since, this whole thing began. When we get back into work in real terms, the world and the world of recruitment in general is not going to be the same as it was pre-COVID. It's just a simple fact that we are going to be going into a situation that for most of us, in fact, for all of us, is completely different from anything we've experienced in the past. When you then think in terms of your own people, let alone us people, the senior people, people that own businesses, their sense of confusion and anxiety in relation to this, what we now call the new world of work, is going to be very palpable. It's going to be very visible, and you will see it and you'll be hearing it. And they're going to need a lot of support, a lot of coaching, a lot of hand holding. Even some of your more experienced people, even the high billers, the top billers, will be sitting at home at the moment and and wondering whether they can still, inverted commas, do it. Do they still have what it takes? This sense of the unknown is something that's going to be worrying people. So investing in your people as we go back into the workplace is going to be significant. If we get it right and we learn what it is that clients need from us in this new world of work, and we coach our people accordingly to meet those needs, to meet those requirements, we've got a brilliant opportunity to really develop our companies. But if we go back into the workplace paying little or no attention to training, coaching, looking after our people, helping them to get back into the world of work, getting their sense of confidence and feeling of assuredness back to where it was pre-COVID, then we've got a problem. So we've really got to be looking at what it is our people need, and importantly relate that to what our clients require from us.
I think that's quite an interesting comment. Again, it's a thing that I've been discussing with all my clients over the last 15 weeks. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've started to ask a very simple question. And it'd be very interesting to see the people on the call today, how they answer this question, if they have it answer it in the same way. I bet everybody has been doing plans and strategy meetings about how they're going to deliver new services to clients, what they're going to deliver to new clients, and what they think clients want. And they've been doing those sessions for a number of weeks now. And I'd be very surprised if anybody on this call or on this webinar hasn't done those type of sessions. So the question that I have to ask is, during all of those sessions, have you ever invited a client into those sessions so we can truly find out what clients actually want? Because I think when I look back over my careers in management, we did lots and lots of sessions like this, but we never invited clients actually into those sessions to really hear firsthand. But it was only when we started to talk to clients properly after the 2008 recession that we started to understand what clients truly needed from us and what they wanted, and we could then change accordingly and re-equip our people accordingly to how to deliver those services to our clients. So I think it's important that to understand what the clients want, we really need to actually know what they want rather than what we think they want. Because remember, clients are going to be doing the same thing. They are also going to be planning what they want from recruitment agencies. And looking at some of the research that's been out there at the moment in time, and I've spent an awful lot of time this week looking at research about what clients truly want, 98% of clients that were asked about working with recruitment agencies stated they want to do one thing: reduce their spend in recruitment. And when asked why that was, it was because they felt there was zero value in recruitment, or they got zero value from their recruitment agency other than the staff that they'd employed, which is a bit of an indictment based on what we actually provide to a client. So we go back to that value. If they don't think we're giving value, how do we change that to actually start to give value? And this again, it goes back to that about re-equipping your people for the new world of work.
Yeah, and I think, to understand, I think you make a really good point, Howard. And I've done that in the past. I remember back in the day at Office Angels, we used to get at conferences, we'd have clients attend, talk about what they felt the service had been, that they'd received from us and in general from other recruitment businesses. And we invited very frank and candid feedback from them. And I think this is a very important point that you're making, that, what did our clients want from us pre-COVID? Do we expect that they're going to anticipate the same level of service, better service? What is it they actually want from us? And I think this is a key point, because if we understand what our clients truly want from us in relation to support services going forward, then I think that leans into what kind of training and coaching are our guys going to need. Otherwise, you are sitting in your offices or you're sitting at home trying to think of the coaching and training and development your people need in isolation. If we're not speaking to clients, we don't understand what their potential needs are going to be. And you're going to have to look at that, I think, in sort of multi-dimensional perspective, because in this early stage of recovery, and it is a very early stage of recovery for the economy, clients are not they're not asking a lot of us because they don't have much by way of recruitment needs in most cases at this point. Once we start moving forward and we get into sort of, we hope, into August, September, October, when things start to increase and business starts to generate at a greater level, then their needs and their expectations from us will increase and change. And then when we get into the back end of the year, and if we start looking into 2021, when most commentators think that the market will start to really come back, once we get into March, April next year, again, their needs, their expectations of the services we provide will change. Now, the only way, as Howard, you've just said, that you can understand what clients truly want is to be speaking to them. And we know that getting them to talk to us at the moment isn't easy, that, they don't have answers for us when we ask them what their recruitment needs are likely to be over the next 6 months. In most cases, they really don't know. And like us, they're desperately trying to keep their businesses afloat, trying to keep their heads above water. Yes, they're going to need to recruit. And then we've talked a lot about the interim and temp market coming back strongly. And that will be the first sign of recovery. And I'm standing by that. The REC last week talked about the fact that their research is showing that interim contract workers is going to be a major area of development and opportunity in the near future. And that backs up everything you and I have been saying, Howard, recently. So I think that they will find it difficult to explain to you right now what they're looking for, but I think you need to be asking questions. We've talked a lot, Howard and I, about developing your service offering to clients. What kind of services, aside from finding candidates for clients or temps or contractors, are what type of services aside from that are you going to offer? And I think it's a brilliant opportunity. And we've talked about mentoring candidates we place. We've talked about onboarding services. We've talked about outplacement services. And we've talked a lot about exclusivity and retained business opportunities and new deals, new ways to work with clients, which we've really banged on about, Howard, you and I, over the last 13, 14 weeks. And I'm really clear on this point. I genuinely believe we have to change what we offer our clients. We have to change the service offerings we provide. We have to adapt the way we work with organizations. I am a firm believer that going into this new era means that we have to amend the way in which we operate. We have to provide enhanced services. We have to be more consultative with our clients. And going in and offering exactly the same services with exactly the same conversations and pitches is not going to work. It doesn't mean that you're going to go out of business, but it does mean that some of your competitors who are beginning to think more innovatively will take a stronger market share. I've said it many, many times. It's not that you don't have to agree with me on every count, guys. If you're listening to this point, it doesn't mean you have to change everything, but I strongly urge you to change the way you operate, enhance the way you operate. And I think this crisis is a brilliant opportunity to improve what we provide to our clients. And that comes back to investing in people and training your guys to be able to deliver these new services, these enhanced services. And I agree with Howard, start talking to clients now. Try to get meetings, even if they're virtual meetings, in place, and talk about what they are going to want from us in the short, medium and long term.
It's quite interesting when you start to look at that point, you start to look at the behavioural changes that clients and candidates are going through. And it's interesting when you look at this time last year, the job boards were stating that round about 25 to 30% of the job population searched for jobs on a monthly basis. Considering at that time there was only about 12 to 15% of the population looking for jobs at that time, the working population looking for that jobs at that time, in fact less. There's now stating that that's almost beyond 50% of the job population is searching for jobs, which says there's a lot of good candidates out there. So their behaviors are changing, but obviously how they apply for jobs is changing as well. They're now saying 80% of the candidates will apply to jobs directly, as well as recruitment agencies. So again, clients are getting more and more savvy with regards to putting jobs out there on job boards, etc., rather than just posting it on their website and hoping that they come out and people find them. So when we started to look at clients said what they are looking for, and this is what they're looking for. And remember, 98% of all clients want to reduce agency fees. They're looking for simple things. They're looking to actually reduce or make their recruitment process more efficient. And we say this constantly, and yet we still work with clients that aren't efficient. They say they want to attract more candidates directly to their applications, which again might be doing us out of a job to a certain degree. But if we do our job correctly, it's always going to drive candidates directly to our clients in some cases. So why shy away from that? If we can help that and drive that to our clients and give that to our clients as an added benefit, then these candidates we might not have seen in the first place anyway. So it's something we should also think about. The big thing they wanted to talk about, though, was the user and the candidate experience. And we talk an awful lot about our candidate experience, but when I look at people's recruitment processes, what I tend to find is they haven't changed for an awful long time, irrespective of what we're doing, irrespective of video platforms, etc., coming in, they haven't changed. We're still pushing the 360 model, and the 360 model is still causing massive pressure within the recruitment market with regards to it, retention of staff, and people moving on from the business because they don't like what we do. And yet we're not actually looking at skill-based recruitment. So if we start to look at skill-based recruitment and have the right people doing the right job, therefore the right people selling to the clients, the right people finding candidates, and the right people delivering roles to our clients, then it will increase that user experience and enhance that user experience. It will also have the desired effect of making the recruitment process more efficient. So we've got to start to think about what clients truly want, and some of them are very much in line with what we're talking about, and yet we talk about them but yet very do little about our services to actually change those type of things. So I think we're now in an opportunity where we've got things like the video platform, which we've talked an awful lot about, but we've got other things that we need to be doing to enhance our process, and this is all about now training our staff. One thing that I did when 2008 came was I spent an awful lot of time talking to our older consultants, our established consultants that had good client books, good order books on a contract base, and had good client pipeline on a permanent basis. And what they were all worried about was big sweeping changes in the marketplace and what was going on in the marketplace. Well, what I looked at was putting in training and development plans for all of the business constantly, which I'll talk about a little bit later on. And what we looked at was how to make small marginal gains for each individual consultant. So it wasn't about large changes, it was about small marginal gains, and training our existing consultants to understand what those small marginal changes would mean to them in an outcome, as an output of their business. And to look at that, if you look at British rowing and British cycling over the last 15 years and their Olympic improvements, they were talking about constantly about small marginal gains, and those small marginal gains made them the most successful teams in British Olympic history ever. And I think we've got to start to think about that, is that if we want to sort of change the staff that we already have, it's not about sweeping changes, it's about small marginal change for each individual person, because they will all be different. And that is about management and understanding our people completely and what we can help them with. But they need to understand why we're making these marginal changes and what effect it will have on them in the outcome. And once they understand what those effects are, then they gladly will make those changes, which will then increase your ability to make placements.
I mean, I think you make a great point here about 360-degree consultants. I mean, and this is a subject matter we've talked about for a very, very long time. And I've said many times that even though I've been in the recruitment industry for, 43 years now, finding 360-degree recruiters has always been incredibly difficult. I think some of us believe we are extremely good 360-degree recruiters, but I'm sure there's lots of nodding heads out there right now when I say that very, very few people have the ability to do everything really well as a consultant. So that's, interviewing candidates thoroughly, qualifying candidates thoroughly, taking job descriptions in a qualified, concise fashion, understanding clients' requirements, business development, putting forward candidates, arranging interviews, briefing candidates, so on and so on and so on. I could go for a huge list. If you break down a consultant's role and you really chunk it down into various segments, and I've done that quite recently with a client, I came up with the best part of 30 different elements to making a placement. I'm sure if you guys out there did something similar, you'll find you can break down a role into about 30 different elements. You think about that. Getting somebody that can do almost every single one of those elements very well indeed is really, really difficult. No surprises, therefore, that 70 to 80% of people we take on to do 360-degree recruitment can't actually do it. And we've come round to the perspective that you should be potentially looking at bringing in people to do research, people to do resourcing, people to do candidate care. That's preparing candidates for interviews, guiding them through the interview process, guiding them through the offer stage, guiding them through the dealing with the counter offer stage, getting them to start in a company, mentoring that candidate potentially post-placement. And then consultants, the people that are actually talking to clients face-to-face using video platforms, offering our services, offering candidates, arranging those interviews, closing deals, business development people, people out knocking on doors, so to speak, or working via video platforms to influence clients to use our services in the various sectors. And we could go on and on. If you break it down, you've probably got 5, 6 different roles. You can condense that a bit, so you can certainly maybe get somebody to do 2 or 3 elements. So you're probably looking at, if you're taking a good strong look at the overall methodology of providing brilliant services to your clients and candidates, 2 or 3 roles rather than one person doing everything. And then that links into training and coaching people. Because are we going to try to coach people to do everything from a 360-degree perspective, as we've been doing for donkey's years, going forward? Or are we going to say, isn't it about time we just step back from this and acknowledged that trying to get people to do 360-degree recruiting is almost impossible? Why not look at what the client wants, what the candidate wants, indeed what we think they would like to get from us based on qualitative and quantitative surveys and research that we do, questions and discussions with clients and candidates, provide them with that level of service, and then find within our business the people that best fit those roles. And if we haven't got those people, then perhaps we need to find them. And I think this is a brilliant opportunity to completely re-engineer the way in which we provide an outstanding service to our clients and candidates. And I keep on saying it, going into this new era with doing exactly what we were doing pre-COVID, in my humble opinion, is a mistake. We have to change. Not radically, you don't need to completely reinvent your business. Many businesses were doing brilliantly pre-COVID, providing great service. And back to Howard's point, if you can improve your service by 1, 2, 3% to do a better job than your competitors in those areas, brilliant, let's do that. But many companies were not outstanding prior to COVID. And here's your chance, if you're one of those, to look at how you can be outstanding as we come out of this. I think it comes back to this analyzing point that Howard was making, understanding what we can provide, but not in isolation and not with just our guys, but close discussions with our clients and candidates.
So let's move that forward a little bit, Paul, and let's talk about training, proper training. Because I think if we're going to start to do things and talk about marginal gains, talk about changing from 360 to something slightly different, then we've got to talk about training. And I think the big question always for most recruitment agencies is, who's actually going to deliver that training? And I think they always think about what training material they have and is it relevant to them. So we've got to start thinking about all those sort of things that training sort of starts to conjure up and starts to bring forward, because training isn't just as simple as, oh, let's do this. I think training has to become more advanced in what we do. If we want to make lots of marginal gains over a short period of time, then training has to be intense. It can't be just a optional thing. It can't be something that's just done once and then never run again and hope people remember it. It has to be done over and over and over again. So training is really important, but it's the effectiveness of the training and how you measure that becomes important. So when we talk about the Olympic teams, the rowing teams, and the cycling teams, they were measuring things by the 100th of the second to get small marginal improvements, but they had to train constantly and do things constantly. So when they actually performed, all those things came in at once. Where we seem to do it the way round, we train once and then go and perform and carry on performing without very little subsequent training after that. And I think we've got to start to get into our heads, the more we train, the more we are skilled at the processes that we actually are trying to deliver to our clients, because training doesn't happen when you're out on the pitch. That's delivery. You're actually delivering. So when you're making a sales call, when you're calling a candidate, etc., you're delivering. And therefore, we've got to look at what's going on. I think it was Mandela said he never loses, he only wins. Because if he doesn't win, he learns. And I think we've got to sort of understand that statement and say, we have got to stop losing and start to learn about why we're losing and then change things. And once we change things, we've then got to train it and carry on training it and carry on training it until it becomes ingrained in people's, I suppose, recruitment DNA, and they can deliver that in and out without a problem.
You know, I mean, I think it's like going to the gym. You know, you can't just go to the gym for a month or so and then think, that's it, I've done it, I'm fit again. I mean, it's a commitment for life. And I think training is exactly the same thing. Learning is a commitment for life. And when you look at training, and if you look at the modern generation, if you go, I mean, I was amazed. I did some work for a non-recruitment business in Kent a couple of years ago. They were providing these amazing whiteboards, electronic whiteboards to schools all over Kent. And the kids had iPads, and this whiteboard was this electronic screen. And I was just astonished, you know, at the development of technology in the classroom and just the impact that the visual element of learning has had on people. If you consider the biggest TV channel in the world today is YouTube. You know, the younger generation watch YouTube more than they watch standard channels on the television. I never watch YouTube because I'm an old geezer, but the younger generation, they use YouTube. And so you know, when you think of learning, what kind of medium do people really understand and really get into? The answer is very straightforward. They like videos, they like watching, and they're not necessarily going to sit down any longer and read pages and pages of training notes. Now, that's not to say that's wrong. And I think you need support notes when you're training people. But there's no question that video training, looking online, watching people. I mean, Howard, you're doing lots of webinar training at the moment. We have videos online for people to watch at their convenience when it suits them. That's the modern world. And to your point, when you think about coaching, and I've done lots and lots of coaching and training over the years, it's a simple fact that if you try to give people a tremendous amount of information in one go, they don't remember it. You know, I remember going to Hudson as the chief operating officer, and I think it was the second week, sitting in the back of the induction course to watch what the coaches, the trainers were giving new people in Hudson. We had 350, 400 people in the business in the UK. So I just sat for the couple of days quietly in the background watching. And it was literally, no disrespect to my previous colleagues, death by PowerPoint. It was deeply dull. I remember sitting in the afternoon after lunch feeling woozy after eating too much lunch and pinching my inner thigh trying to keep myself awake because I just found it dull. We changed everything, the way in which we went about developing our induction training, and we reduced the learning experience to about 45-minute periods so that people were alert during that period of time. They remembered most of what they'd heard in that 45-minute period. If you give people a download of 1 or 2 days, and then you ask them a week later what they've remembered, you'd be lucky if they've remembered 10 to 15%. And it doesn't matter how good a trainer you are or how good the material is that you've provided to people. Most of us just do not have the capacity to recall that volume of information. Plus, the information you give them has to be relevant to what they're doing at that time. So if you talk to them about things that are relevant in terms of their role, but they're not actually going to be doing those jobs and dealing with those responsibilities for 4 to 8 to 12 weeks, by the time they get there, they've forgotten everything you've taught them. So teach them things that are relevant to what they're doing now, bite-sized chunks. Keep your coaching sessions down to 45 minutes to an hour. In that respect, you have a great chance they'll remember most of what you've taught them, and do a lot of stuff online, video work, modern technology, because the old style doesn't work. And we know that How many of us are sat in these classroom training experiences and have literally fallen asleep? And I'll put my hand in here. It's just really hard to focus and be fully concentrated for any length of time in a warm room for a day. I mean, honestly, it's literally torture. That's not the way people learn, and it's certainly not the way the younger generation have been taught in schools.
I think it's quite interesting, Paul. When I was made a director at CP, one of my responsibilities was to work with the training department and help them improve training, when in truth it was all about reducing the attrition in the business and making more placements. And at the time, the training team had, or each consultant, should I say, got 2.7 days worth of training from the training team. And that included, if you were new, a 2-day induction course. So my first role that I undertook with them, because what training didn't like, they didn't like the managers and team leaders delivering training, and they wouldn't release the training courses or the training material out to the teams because they felt that they should be the people delivering the training courses. And again, these were all 1-day, 2-day, 3-day courses for various different things. So I created what was called the training briefcase and made them create hour-long training sessions that the team leaders and managers could use in their teams on a weekly basis, depending on what they do. We created a portal so they could collect the information and use the information. We then trained the managers to deliver training. And what we found that I then mandated across the business, across my business areas, that each week the trainers must train the teams for an hour. What I found was attrition dropped. It took less time to make newcomers become more productive. My managers became more accountable, but more importantly, staff felt that they were more invested in and felt loved. I made a point of every office that I visited that I would do a training session. So I was into 5 offices every week. I would do 5 training sessions, etc. So really, most offices were getting 2 sessions at least a week from there. And what I started to do was monitor performance, and I started to monitor performance of the businesses that were growing, or the offices that were growing, and those that weren't. And the common denominator, when I started to speak to the staff on the ones that weren't growing, they weren't actually getting the training. They weren't being invested in. So again, it was all about those small marginal gains. It was about changing things all the time. So train, review, train, review. Failure only happens if we don't learn from our mistakes. So quarterly, I'd review the training courses, because what I was thinking was, it can't be the trainer if the person is doing the right things. It must be the material in the courses. So let's train the courses. Training hated it because it obviously created quite a bit of work for them. So I started to do a lot myself, so they didn't know. But what they loved was the actual results, because the results reflected on them, because the more we increased. And what we found was that we increased our placement ratio, and our average deal value went up. So our percentage went up from 15% to 16.8%, and our placement value went up by $2,000 a placement. So a massive amount of money suddenly started to drop onto the bottom line, because we were investing in our people. So I think it's important that whatever we do, we've got to look at skills and how we grow those skills. One of the things that clients said that they wanted to do better was they wanted to fill their jobs first time, not in the least time. And we are very, very good at trying to push CVs right across clients' desk as quick as possible, thinking the first past the post wins, when really it's not the first past the post. It's the best candidate past the post in the quickest time that wins. So let's not be too busy rushing and cutting corners. We need to generate that and work from that. And that leads us into a sort of another question, Paul, with regards to training and development. Obviously, there's lots of small companies, and as companies get bigger, it's harder to train because people are doing more and more things without sort of allotting time to that. So a lot of people start to bring in the buddy systems and things like that. Give me your view of the buddy systems and how you think that will help companies develop quicker and create more opportunity for their staff.
Look, I think just before I answer your question, I just want to pick up a point you made, Howard, which I think is incredibly valuable. Investing in people, which is the title of this particular webinar, is there are many touch points. You know, one of the questions that somebody's asked was, you know, how do you get people to stay with the business? How do you get that cultural fit? How do you get that stickiness to your business so people do not want to leave you. And this point about investing in people is so important. You have to make people feel valued. And you do that in so many ways. One of the things that has, I feel, been a blight, in a sense, in our industry is the view that people only work in our industry to make lots of money. Well, that is BS, frankly. It is total BS. Of course, we all want to get a great living out of it. We all want to, if we run a business, develop our productivity, develop our turnover, our profits. Of course. I mean, it's a given. Of course, it's a given. But I genuinely believe that people work for people based upon how valued they feel. And making people feel valued is, yes, it's about making sure that their remuneration schemes are healthy, they're good, they're attractive, absolutely. But to my mind, it's equally, if not more important, to make people feel valued by the company so that they feel they have a voice, they're listened to, that communication is constant, it's transparent, they're invited to get involved, their ideas are listened to, acted upon, and to this point, that they're invested in relation to their development, to their training, to their education, and their career paths are clear, and they have the opportunity to grow in a business, take on more responsibility, and become senior in a company, even to the extent that they become shareholders and directors. And I think if you are looking to keep people in your company, yes, of course, remuneration schemes are important. And we know that bonus plans dictate behavior, but that's just one small element of a broad spectrum of initiatives that you need to take to keep people engaged in your company. And you have to work on that. And I think your point now leading into this about mentoring and buddying is an important one, Howard, because it is about getting other people in the business to get involved in supporting their colleagues across the organization. And for me, mentoring and buddying, when you ask people to get involved if they want to as mentors or buddies, is something that they do because they want to help. They want to develop people. They want the business to grow. They want new colleagues to feel a part of the organization, be a part of the culture. And they don't do it because they're going to get paid more money. They don't do it because it's going to give them a promotion. They do it willingly. They give of themselves willingly because they've bought into the company, hearts and minds, and they want to be a part of that growth and development. They want to be kind and supportive to others. And I think that comes right back to the culture of the business, the culture that you're trying to develop in your organization, which, by the way, if it's a healthy culture, and you've said this in the past, Howard, and you're absolutely right, you have a healthy internal culture, guess what? The candidates feel it, it's palpable, your clients feel it, it's palpable, and that sense of culture is what really generates and drives your profits and your turnover. This buddying issue is another element of that feeling valued. If you trust your people to coach, to be able to get close to people elsewhere in the company and support them, then they in turn feel valued because it's very clear that you trust them, that you've embodied, what's the word I'm looking for? You've given them the opportunity to contribute towards the development of a colleague, and that I think is a marvelous thing.
So I looked at it in a similar way, but slightly different. I took over a failing company as MD, and did a bit of research when I first arrived, sort of looking at, lift the bonnet, have a look what's actually going on, and found it was a company of pure individuals. And so what I did was I put everybody on a 2-day course that I ran on the core basics of recruitment. So I knew that everybody understood what the core basics were. It didn't matter whether they had 5 years, 10 years, 20 years experience, everyone did the course. And what I did then was I then started to create buddy systems, good experienced consultants with the junior consultants. And what I was looking for was to see how people started to develop other people. I had all the junior consultants reporting directly into me. So I was on the shop floor every day. I was ingrained in their recruitment. I was ingrained in their training. And so they were asking me lots and lots of questions. But what I was also doing was observing the buddying system. I was observing the people who cared about their buddy and those who didn't, those who nurtured and those who didn't, those who was displaying management qualities, but without actually realizing they were just displaying management qualities. I can't express the sort of feeling that it sort of gets when you start to see people who feel valued in the business and they feel that their opinion counts and they feel that they can ask any question. They start to develop quickly. So what I was actually looking for, rather than sort of looking at a buddy system, which I did to try and increase profit very quickly, what I was actually looking at was a succession plan of my next managers. Who can manage people, who cared about people, and therefore it wasn't based on the best billers, it was based on the people who actually did the right things for their people underneath them. So don't underestimate how people feel about work and have they got what they call a friend at work or a buddy at work to work with. If you start to create a true buddy system, what you tend to find is that people will work off each other and people then become self-sufficient and people then will start to ask other people for help rather than sat there, drowning in their own misery because they're afraid to ask for help because of the way some companies work, that they become the big stick and carrot approach. So to me, it was a way of opening the business up. And what we tends to found then was who was actually truly in love with the business and would do anything to help the business move forward, and who was just very, very self-centered. And therefore we start our plan with regarding how to move the business forward based around those correct people rather than around the wrong people. So buddy systems have more than just one thing about training and mentoring people. It's also about looking at that succession plan for the next people coming through your business to help develop your business and drive your business forward. I think we sort of, when we look at that, Paul, one of the questions that we were asked this week was, how do we train and develop people remotely so that they feel part of the business? And I think, again, that's a new phenomenon for quite a lot of people having remote working. And how do we set up that remote training to keep people in line with the expectations that they are set right from day one?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an interesting question, Howard, because I've had a few clients recently that have been bringing in new people during this lockdown period and have been saying, how do I induct them when we're not actually in the office? And it is a challenge. There's no question about that. This kind of comes back to the earlier point I was making, where trying to give people a massive amount of information quickly just doesn't work. As I was saying, if you try and spend a week just cramming information into somebody's head and then thinking you've done your job, you've trained them, they should be good to go, that's a big mistake. So I think when you think about remote onboarding and induction, then you've got to be looking at it from the perspective of two things. Number one, it needs to be a detailed planning and training exercise. So I feel you're probably looking at breaking down this initial induction training into 13 to 16 weeks. And there are certain elements of that training in priority order that you're imparting with every passing day. So you would look at every element of a consultant's role and you break that down into training modules, and you break those modules down into whatever, and my maths isn't really working for me, there'll be people laughing at me, but whatever 100 days looks like, and you break that down into sort of 45-minute, 1 hour modules per day. Now, back to the point, you're going to be doing some of that online. So you can point people to videos like the stuff you've been doing, Howard. You can point people to videos perhaps you've done in your business. I've done a whole stream of videos for a particular client for induction training. So we've now got quite a number of hours worth of induction videos that people can watch. Not just me, but other people in the business. So you can watch that in your own time. And you can do that remotely. I mean, you can not only put people on to watch videos, but you can also do Zoom calls with them and do a 1 hour session. Now, the important thing, as I said earlier, is once you've done that particular module, they've got to put that into play. They have to then practice what you've just trained them to do. Otherwise, it's meaningless. If you think of learning to drive a car, when we were all learning to drive a car, you did that over a period of 20 odd weeks, 26 weeks, or 26 lessons, 30 lessons. And you were progressively improving and doing more and more difficult things as you went along. So in your first training session to learn to drive a car, you were essentially learning where the pedals were, what the handbrake did, how you used the mirror, and if you were brave enough, you got up into top gear. And that was pretty much the end of the first session. By the time you did your 26th lesson, you were doing much more advanced things in preparation for your test. Teaching people to do recruitment is going to take you 100 days bare minimum, and you break it down into these bite-sized chunks per day. Back to the point, think about your resources. You are going to need to get other people in your business to assist you. So we talk mentoring, we talk buddying, and there are other people in your company that are potentially brilliant at training and coaching. You may also be looking at remote training, in other words, using external trainers, people like me, people like Howard and others who can train and develop your people. Normally, they'd come to you or you would send your people to them, but at the moment, often via Zoom calls or whatever. And you'd look at that and you'd have to also ensure you test them on a regular basis to ensure that they're learning. The quickest way you know that somebody's listened to what you've taught them is to ask them to repeat it back to you, and then you know if they've heard and they've understood.
It's quite interesting that, because one of the things that we did last year, Paul, when basically from our clients asking us, because when we go on site, we're asked quite a lot, can we do recruitment training? And yes, we can. And obviously all the training that I've been doing on a Wednesday has been taken from the academy that we have developed as an online academy. But when we developed the academy, what we developed was a set of coaching courses, and we went away and spoke to quite a few educationalists about how people learn and how the best way to learn is. So these courses are between 10 and 30 minutes long, but at the end of every course, as you said there, they have a test, and the test is there to not be, big brotherish. The test is there to make sure learning has taken place. And we wanted to go one step further, because what people say about learning is people can learn visually, audibly, etc., etc. But what they want to think about is, can you write it back down? Can you talk about that back to somebody? Can you regurgitate what you've just learned in a fashion? So we created PowerPoint presentations, and what we had our clients do was bring people in. We created a 13-week training program from them, which is all on the academy. And what they did was they said, right, this is week 1, this is week 2, this is week 3, etc. They watched the video, they passed the test, and then on a Friday, they were asked to present back using the PowerPoint presentations what they'd learned. So the managers could then see whether or not training had taken place. What else that meant was that if they had a consultant that was really good at one part of the recruitment process, as you said, you've broke it down into 30 odd parts, Paul, then they could deliver training on that session. So they'd get training from the academy, which they would look at. They'd get training from an internal person, which again enhances what's been learned. They'd get a course, and then they'd have to present that back to them. So we ensure that training has taken place. And what that does, it shows sort of empathy and understanding. And it shows that you're sort of enriching the experience of the person within your business, and you're delivering from day one. You're not expecting, here you go, here's a week-long course, we're now throwing you out into the sea and it's sink or swim. You could do the week-long course, that's not a problem, but then have a 13-week sessions all the way after that, embedding all of that course material into them, driving that course material into them. So after that 13 weeks, they are quicker, faster, and more efficient from there, and that includes that buddy system, etc. So constant recaps are really important, and I think the development of the online platform enable people to do that. And certainly the clients that are using that have said that their new starters to getting up and running happens an awful lot quicker, because they're now following a process. But what it means is the whole business now is following a process. They're talking uniform language, they're talking uniform training, and therefore everyone's doing the same thing, which means it's very easy then to copy and replicate what good people look like and what people do. Obviously, we've got to measure that, Paul. And that leads to the next question, which I think, as we've got 10 minutes left, is the biggest question that we have is, what do we do with KPIs?
Well, absolutely. There's a question. Just before I answer that, just one last point about remote training. If you can, get people to listen into your phone calls, because that can be done. One of my clients is working and inducting people remotely, and they're getting their new people to listen in on the calls and also participate, listen in, be involved in the Zoom calls. Let them watch you, listen to you, because that's a brilliant way for people to learn. So KPIs. So this is a question that's come up a lot. How do you measure people in this new world of work? Are they the same targets we had prior to the lockdown? I mean, clearly the answer is no. They're not going to be the same targets because we're not operating in the same market. One of the questions that we've got sent in from one of our listeners, Howard, is related to what do we do? Do we set the number of calls people make as we were before, or do we talk about what the results should be? Now, for me, this is a relatively easy question to answer because I think it's always been, regardless of what time of the year or what kind of economic circumstances are surrounding us, it's always been about results. We're a results business. And you guys will know there are days in normal circumstances when you can pick up the phone and in 5 calls, you've got 4 client meetings arranged. Bingo. The recruitment gods are smiling on you and you're having a great day. And you will equally know there are days when you make 100 phone calls and you can't get a single client meeting arranged for love nor money. In the end, it's always been about results. So the question that you've got to ask yourself is, what kind of results are we looking for? What does success look like in the return to work period? And you work backwards from that point. Now, I've always taken a view, even back in my days of running Office Angels, I'll be honest, I didn't monitor telesales calls or calls. Never bothered, wasn't interested. Largely because I felt people could falsify the figures and it was very difficult to monitor. And my attitude then is still the same today. I don't care how many calls it takes to get the results. What I'm interested in are the results. If you have a great day and it takes you 10, 15 calls to get 4 or 5 meetings arranged, I'm thrilled to bits. I really am genuinely delighted. But if you're on a roll like that, make 30, 50 calls because those days don't come around every day. If it takes you 80 calls to get 3, 4 meetings arranged, I'm sorry for you. I know you've had a rotten day, but at least well done, you got those meetings arranged. And I think that's the attitude we've got to go into in this new situation. What that means, I think, and I fear, is that we're going to have to work doubly, trebly, quadruply, and I'm making up words, hard to get the results that we would have got with a lot less effort prior to the lockdown. And if that's the case, that's the case. This is why we've been saying about the old adage about when the going gets tough, the tough get going. That's what it's going to be about, guys. You and I and everybody around us are going to have to work extremely hard to get results, but it's results that are going to matter, not the amount of input that we put into it.
I think that's quite an interesting one because we talked last week about rewriting plans, maybe having a 13-week ramp up for all consultants, whether they're new or old coming back. And I sort of looked at this and I started to look back at some of my old notes from years gone by. And I came across a note that just wrote KPIs, PITA, PITA. And PITA stood for pain in the A. And I've stood there and I sort of to read that note and I thought, what does that actually mean? Why did I write that down? What have I done? If you ever sort of come into my office, you'll find hundreds and hundreds of notebooks through all my career that I wrote incessantly. And I go back and look at them and just to sort of refresh my mind. And it was all about KPIs. And I was finding that the KPIs were demotivating people. They weren't motivating. And what I found was that if the target's not important, then it becomes impotent. And so we've got to make sure that our KPIs are important to the people. They have to understand why we're trying to make them do that. We're then going back to that marginal gain conversation about what they think. So guess what? If people aren't hitting your KPIs, it's not because the KPIs are wrong. It's because the people can't perceive the value in those KPIs. So have they been trained? Do they understand the importance of the KPIs? Do they understand how they are managed to hit the KPIs? The flip side of that is the managers understand that KPIs, although they are a figure that says on average, if this is the average number of calls that needs to be made to hit the number of requirements that you need to get to make the number of placements that you need to get each month, then they can flex with each individual person, because each individual person is different. Hence why for some people, the pitta syndrome came out an awful lot, that the KPI became a pain in the for them because they were smashing their KPIs, or should I say smashing their targets, but not smashing their KPIs, and yet the manager was still smashing them over the head with a stick because they weren't hitting their KPIs. And I can give you a live example of a consultant that I took on board. She was way above her target at the company that she was at. She was working very diligently, bringing them lots and lots of money, but she hated their KPIs. And I said, give me an example of your KPIs. She said, I went on a client visit from Leeds to Newcastle. I had 3 visits in Newcastle, one at 9 o'clock in the morning, one at 11, and one at 3:30. I got back into Leeds at 5:30. I was then made to sit down and do 2 hours, and it had to be the duration, not the number of calls, 2-hour duration of outbound calls to clients. What a waste of time. She's been out all day, and at 5:30 she's expected to make 2 hours of outbound calls to clients. I asked her what she did. She said, I called my mates for 2 hours. As soon as that clock ticked over for 2 hours, I was then out of the door. But I was made to sit and stay in the office. Hence she left. She'd been there 8 months, already had a contract book of just over $3,000, so was obviously an extremely good consultant, but was being driven out the office because the KPIs to her were a pain in the derriere. So we've got to talk about our KPIs, and we go back to that comment. Are the targets important? Because if they're not important, they are impotent. And if they're impotent, it means that people don't understand them. They don't perceive the value in them. So your KPIs have to add value. When we start talking about marginal gains again, then you need to set your KPIs so they make marginal gains constantly. And it means that you could ramp your KPIs up over a certain period of time. If you've got the data that you can extract out from your CRM, you can start to give people almost individual KPIs. You can create your company KPIs for the new people coming in, saying this is on average what you need to be doing, but then you can start to look what they actually, how they perform. But the better people, they should have their own individual KPIs. And again, I never manage, as Paul said, I never manage by the number of calls, number of hours on the calls, etc. I was simply looking at the number of jobs they canvassed on per week, the number of CVs they had per week, and the number of new interviews they created that week. Because I knew if they hit a certain figure on all of those 3 criteria, then they would do the revenue that was required to hit their target and beyond. And to me, that was more important. It was about making a KPI that was motivating, not demotivating. So I think
sorry, go on.
So I'm going to say, so I think KPIs are important, but we have to use them wisely because they do become absolute pitta.
It's difficult to follow that comment. I just wanted to make one last point about this. One of the things you've really got to do is rewrite your plans and projections. Anything that you'd forecasted pre-COVID, so let's say hypothetically your financial year began January the 1st, tear it up, your forecasts, your projections, tear them up, start again, and then write them again, and then tear them up and start again, and write them again and tear them up and start again, and get your consultants to get involved as well in making their own projections and tear them up, start again. You guys are going to need to really work hard on trying to understand what the realistic or even stretch projections are going to be looking like for the next 3 to 4 months. And then you're going to be reviewing that, I think, on almost a weekly basis. Go back, look at the projections, revise. A week later, look again, revise. This is the world we're in right now. It's completely unpredictable. And I think that if you can do that, then off the back of that, once you've identified what your targets are going to be realistically and at a stretch, over the next 2 to 3 months from that position, you can then work backwards to establish what your KPIs and targets are going to be. And then you divide those out amongst the people that you have and relative to their experience and their abilities. But get your people involved in this. So whatever you had pre-COVID, forget about it, tear it up, start again. Because I'm afraid none of us could have ever predicted what we were going to be going through. Now, take a positive view as well, because just because we're in this situation coming out of it, thank God now, doesn't mean you can't be optimistic about what you're expecting. And if we come right back to the top of this discussion, let's look at what we can offer our clients that we haven't offered before, the service offerings that we can provide that will give us extra revenue streams and will provide us with extra market share. Howard and I have both managed very successful businesses beyond and through recessions and downtimes, and we've come out stronger than we entered those positions. You can do exactly the same thing, but do look at your projections, be realistic. If you're unrealistic and if you give people outrageously high targets to go for based upon pre-COVID levels, you're going to really upset people and they're going to get very disheartened and demoralized pretty fast because you're giving them targets they cannot achieve. Let's be realistic. Push them hard, push yourselves hard, but let's be realistic based upon current situation. But because it's so fast changing at the moment, you're going to constantly have to review and revise your projections and your KPIs.
So to do our research, Paul, and the research that we've done over the last 15 weeks is that one of the KPIs that we need to hit is we need to finish within the hour, because otherwise people start to switch off. So we've just hit the hour now. So, it's been a very interesting a very interesting webinar with lots of interesting comments from the questions that you posed to us. If anyone's got any questions now that they want to ask, feel free to ask. Next week, as we said, due to this week's and Paul's and I instantly jumping in and setting something up, and when the person wasn't available, next week we have set up with Lauren, and we will be doing our marketing training course next week and webinar next week, so we'll bring Lauren in to do that. So if you haven't got any questions, then thank you very much for attending. We hope we've enlightened you and helped you with the questions that you had. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thank you. Keep safe. Have a great week ahead. Take care now.